Hello, everybody, and welcome to week 3. So, as you can see on FSO, weeks 3 and 4 are actually combined, and it's all about getting the NPCs to start interacting with players and us issuing those commands, being able to select an individual agent at a time. Let's just talk about how this week is currently laid out. So, next assignment that we have up is NPCs and a manager. So our last assignment, we were able to press a button and pause our agent. This assignment will go in and allow us to select a specific agent and see how we can set up the code as like a manager and be able to interact with those agents one at a time. So NPCs and a manager. Next up is the actual big project for the class. Puts everything together that we've been kind of building up to this point in a game type style. We'll talk a lot more about that in the upcoming lectures. And on Wednesday, I'll demonstrate a completed version of that so you guys can see it all functioning and kind of know what to expect for that one. There is another discussion post required for feature analysis for state machines. This is part 2, where the previous one, you chose all games that you guys are kind of playing and were supposed to be different games and things like that. For this one, it gives you a little blurb of like an elevator pitch, as if you're stuck in the elevator with somebody and they were describing a type of game that they're looking forward to and that they wanted to make. And it has you all working from that same little blurb rather than picking and choosing different games for this one. At the very end, we end up wrapping up the class with a little bit of a going further with Unreal specific AI. And that'll direct you to some resources to look into the AI further in Unreal, along with some other great resources for general working with Unreal stuff. As kind of like a wrap up to the class and things that you might be using in future classes. All right, so today's topic will be mainly focusing on this NPCs and a manager. Oh, actually, before I talk about that, let's also just remind you guys that this class is an immediate reschedule class. So that last week, Wednesday, is the last day that we actually have lecture, and pretty much the class is almost over at that time. We do have the this next assignment just due the day after. Thursday is the absolute last day I can accept any submissions. So with that sneaky do on Wednesday, you can only be one day late with it. On Friday, I will have to be grading and I cannot accept any late submissions at that point. So just watch out for that. We only have a week and a half left for wrapping up a class, so keep that in mind. So now into the NPCs and a manager. Just a quick link to the Google Drive document. And in here, one big thing that'll be different from the previous one, this builds off that same concept of we'll be providing you with a state machine. However, the developers, aka me, have decided to release an update and change some things around to make it a little bit more intuitive than the previous one was. So this is simulating something that you'll be experiencing a lot while you're working with game developers. They'll release an update and you have to adapt your code to work with the new API, things like that. This one has a new starter project. So do not use your previous starter project and try and work through it. So you will have to download that actual asset. So if we actually download it, NPCs manager assets, we'll open it up and start exploring it. So that's downloaded. Let me extract it. Well, I'll extract it somewhere else on my computer. So it's not in downloads. Downloads getting kind of cluttered right now. Classes. SCD3. New folder. Let's see, this is 2104. We'll just put it in there since that other folder is a little bit crowded. So downloads, just drag that zip in. It's out of the downloads folder. Unzip it here. Open that up and open up the project. And then wait for Unreal to load. Oof, it's going real slow right now. All right. So this looks pretty similar to the previous assignment. If we press play, you see there are two agents kind of walking around. They're doing the same thing as the previous assignment. I'm going to click the game window to make sure the inputs are going to the game. If I press space, we see they currently both pause. Press space again, and they unpause. So right now I'm issuing the command to all agents. This assignment is about being able to select one of those agents and be able to actually choose which one we're affecting. All right, so before we get into the content of being able to select one at a time, we're going to want to explore these agents and see kind of how things are changed. Let me hide this so it's not up in there. And turn the developer's content off so it looks normal. All right. One big change that's been done since the last assignment, I've added comments to each one of these blueprints. Like if we hover over them, we'll see a tooltip about how they're working, a little bit more info about it, stuff like that. So idle, we see it changes color to dark green, stops the movement, sets a variable for the time, on tick, checks if those times are passed, and so on and so on. We open them up. There's also additional comments inside here to explain how things are working. So idle state, it's about the same as before, just with additional comments there. Patrol state, we see patrol state has changed a little bit. Patrol state is now just directly moving the actor. Not only that, it's got this get current nav point. And if we see our variables, we actually have a variable inside this AC state patrol. That's moved now. Previously, it was on the agent itself. If we just selected an agent, it was right on the agent descripted. So I have this agent selected, but there is no nav point list. If we wanted to change that, it's now encapsulated more in the state itself. Our patrol state was the only state that was using our nav points. So the patrol state is the only one with the actual array here. So we do have to make sure we go to that specific component, not just the agent itself, when we want to modify those different nav points or see those nav points at all. So please keep that in mind. Next up, let's look at just the basic agent. So if we open up the agent blueprint, we see there's now comments, begin in place, starts the agent in patrol. We have that toggle pause added for you for this one, rather than being called back state like it was in the last assignment. It's now restore previous state, just updating the names of several different functions. I think this was called is in state. Now it's just is current state. So trying to make it a little bit more intuitive with the names and things like that from the last time you guys were interacting with the state machine. We have a helper function to set the body color. I think this used to be called override color or something like that. But just you're going to want to dig in and see the new names of the functions, how things are held. One other big change that I kind of skipped over for patrol. Previously, our agent itself had an overlap event. Now, all the agent is doing is telling it what state to start in, has a function to change the color for the states to use, is able to turn the pause on or off. And this one is just something to prevent a circular include, so that states can call this directly on the agent without having to reference the state machine that they're inside. So we no longer have that collision happening here. In the individual states, when we look at base state, what kind of functions that it comes with, we see we now have enter state, tick state, exit state, along with a begin overlap state. And this actually allows, when we're in a certain state, if we're looking for something specific and only wanted in that state to deal with the overlap, we can do that right here in the state itself, rather than just always checking it on the agent, then having to check, is it currently in this state? If so, then do some extra stuff. The states themselves can have their specific overlap functionality. So we have begin as well as end for reference. That'll come in really handy for when we're adding additional functionality when we're in a certain state to, let's say, when we're in a pursue state, and if it loses or the player leaves a certain volume, then it stops caring about it or something like that. The example use of it in this one is when we're in patrol. So patrol would be the only state that cares about when it hits one of the nav points. Changed up the code here. Before it was just checking if it hit something with the tag of nav point. This one is specifically asking if that other actor we're hitting is the one we're trying to get to. So that'll solve an issue of if there was a nav point in the way of its path, it just ran into that one by accident. We only want to choose the next one if it's specifically the one we're trying to get to. So there's some extra protection built in here with the newer way of doing things. All right. So that's the general gist of most of the changes. I'll let you guys explore the state machine itself. We could open it up. So just the state machine now has some more comments about how things are functioning to try and make it a little bit more clear about, well, how things are functioning. All right. It also cleaned up some additional bools that were used before to see if it should enter and turning those on or off. Now just checking if next state is set, switch to that state, stuff like that, rather than having an extra bool or extra variables to track when we can just see if next state is set or not. All right. So that's the general stuff there. In the last one, it had mentioned we were doing all of our scripting inside level blueprint for our input to go to the agent. We open up our level blueprint now. We see it's got spacebar is the only command. There's no variables or anything set up for you. And let me hop over to the instructions just to show you guys kind of what you'll be expecting. So you'll be basically rebuilding that functionality from the previous assignment, where you could press the right button, cycle through, and get it interacting all in the whatchamacallit, the state machine. Not state machine, geez. Level blueprint. Sorry, brain fart there. And you'll be setting all that up inside the level manager, or the level blueprint. Now, one thing I do want to talk about and differ from the assignment, level blueprint's great for a specific level. But if we're making a game where we're going to have these agents and possibly multiple levels, level blueprint might not be the best place to put that. So for today, I'm going to do basically the same functionality of being able to select the agents and change and issue one command at a time. But rather than doing it just in the level blueprint, like that document will walk you through, we're going to switch things up. And I'm going to create an actor that I can place in the level and have a specific agent manager inside the level. So I could have that duplicated across multiple levels, things like that, rather than copying and pasting the code each time. So I'm going to create an actor. Actor was just something that can be placed in the level and have code in it. We'll rename this. And we already have something called agent manager. I'll call this BP level manager blueprint. We'll open that up. And one of the first things I'm going to need to do is have a way for this to reference all of our agents in our level. There's a few different ways we can set that up. If we're in the level manager, as this one is showing, it will have you make an array of each one of those in a level, stuff like that. But if we're in our separate blueprint, our level blueprint doesn't have the functionality of just getting a direct reference to things. We'll need a variable to store a reference to these agents. We'll call this agents. And we're going to change the type either over here or over in the details. Details gets you more info. So we'll change it here to the agent. We have BP nav agent. I want it to be a specific object that we have in the level. All right. Problem is that's only one agent right now. Can't assign it here. If I wanted to edit this in one of them that I place in the level, we can make it instance editable. So just like the nav points array, very similar methodology for that. So if we place one of these in the level and clear out our filter, we have the ability to assign it to a specific agent in here. But it is just the single. We've already seen how to create arrays. So we'll just swap that over to an array. And then we can assign that in the editor. We currently have two agents. We'll just pop in 2 here. Agent 2 will be sub 0. Agent 4 will be sub 1. Save everything. I'm going to, for right now, disable this spacebar press. I'm going to break the link there. Make sure that it is disabled by testing it in game. Click the game, press space. Something is happening. It's just raising up our camera because the default pawn basically floats up when you're holding space. Should put that on a different key, but whatever. Good enough for now. So our agent, our level blueprint will just close out since we no longer have any of that code running. Our level manager will need code. So get rid of the default stuff. We don't need any overlaps or anything for that. We're just treating this as a manager type object, not a real object in the scene. Our agents were already assigned in the level, so that's good to go. We just need to do stuff with them. We'll need a variable to track which current agent we have selected. Current index or current selected. Change this. This will be an integer. And swap that to a single variable. You can right click this container to swap between single and array if you didn't know. Current selected, we'll say starts out at -1. I want nothing selected when I first start the game. So -1 is not an index in that array. We look at that. Arrays always start with a 0 index first. And we currently have 2 items in the array. The maximum length of this would be 2. Our last valid index would be 1 since it's got that 0 starting count. All right. So just following kind of that same methodology of when it hits one of the next nav points. In fact, let's pull that up. Our patrol state, AC state patrol. When it has this function called choose next nav point, it basically takes an index, does ++, does a valid check. If it's past the end, resets it back to 0. We're going to basically reuse that same concept, but rather than working on our nav points array, we're working with our agents array. So I want this to happen when we press the right key. So if I just look for right, and that's going to pop up a lot of stuff. There's lots of things named right. Let's do input right. A little bit better. Keyboard event right. That's the one I was looking for. That's pressing the right arrow. When we press that, before I try and do anything with the agents and get it cycling with that, first thing I'm going to do is a print string. Should print hello when I press right. I have one of these one of these level managers in here. Oh, I called it level manager, not agent manager. Too many names of the same thing. Okay, let's rename that. That's going to bother me because it doesn't manage levels, it manages agents. Sorry about that. Agents manager. All right. So pressing right should fire this event off. I'm going to even have this up while I'm running so I can see it executing. It's already got the debug filter selected for the one in the level. If we play, click to give input to the game, and press the right arrow, one of the default camera controls rotates right. All right, but I'm also not seeing a print message up here or anywhere in here. I just see the changing of states between idle and patrol. And this also never showed that it was firing off. So our level blueprint worked perfectly fine when we were doing spacebar and stuff like that. But normal blueprints or normal actors in the level do not receive any input unless you enable it on him. So level blueprint, also a little special in the way that it always receives input as well. Only the character that you're currently controlling would normally receive input. If we want to add input to another actor in the level, I want this one to have input so it can run this stuff. We're going to say right at the beginning of the game, or begin play, I'm going to ask for the player controller from the gameplay framework. Get player controller. And player index 0, that's first player or first controller keyboard it detects. I'm going to look for enable input. Pushes this actor onto the stack of input being handled by the player controller. All right, well, I want agent manager to be on that stack, whatever that is, so it can process input events. One thing I absolutely hate about pulling off a player controller and then using enable input, it plugs it in as the target. Target for enable input here, it's actually the blueprint that you want to add to process input. Well, that'd be self. I want agent manager or agents manager to process input. Player controller has another nice spot called player controller. I don't know why it defaults to target and not player controller. Just a little bit of a pet peeve there for me. So with this, it should now enable input right at the beginning of the game, and our right press should now fire off. We'll pull that up again, try playing and seeing if it's firing off. Play, click the game for input in there, press the right arrow, and boom, it is firing off. All right, so we've got input being processed on here. One step down. Next, when we press right, I want to change what I currently have selected. All right, no longer need the print string, we're just testing with that. So when we press right, I'm going to take our current selected and basically duplicate that same kind of process we have here. Change the current one, check if it's still valid, if not, loop it back, and then do whatever we want to it. So current selected, we'll change it by 1, ++ to get an increment. And after we change it, we'll make sure that it is still valid. Grab our agent array, ask is valid index. Which index are we checking? Well, of course, the currently selected. I could plug that in right there, since that is already there. We're going to use this to branch. If it is valid, we just selected a new agent. So I'm going to add a print string here. Print string. And I'm going to, instead of just printing a static or hard-coded message that's typed in here, I'm going to freshen it up a little bit with an append for a string. So we can have a little bit of formatting and see the name of the agent that we have selected. So that's when it's true. When it was false, we had to make sure that it resets it back to the beginning if we've got a no longer valid index. So current selected, we'll be setting, holding Alt and dropping one of the variables will get you the set node. And we'd still want it to tell us which one is selected now, since this does change current selection. for what we want to put in our string. We used an append so we could have some formatting for some text. Let's say currently or changed selection to colon space. And then I want the name of the currently selected agent. All right, well, let's get our agents array, get the agent specifically, the one we have selected. And if we just plug that into a string, it's got an auto convert that'll drop a get display name there. Another thing we'll do is just to give us even more debug information with the print string, do a space at index space. We'll add another pin and output the actual index number. I could grab it from there, but don't like it going behind there. So we'll just drop that in. And, oh, forgot it's going to convert to a string and add a node in between. All right. So it should print this message letting us know which one we have selected as well as the index of it. All right. So we play, click the game window, press right, change selection to agent 2 at index 0. Press right again, index 1, press right, and we've got our right arrow functionality all working. We're able to change that selection. Let's also get our pause message going to that individual agent. So our agent manager is now doing the input. We're able to select the agent. Let's go ahead and add another key, the space key on the keyboard this time. If I could spell the second letter right. Keyboard space. When we press space bar, I want it to pause the currently selected agent. So we'll have to get our agent array or get the current agent again. And having this as 3 nodes, it's not too bad, doesn't take up a lot of space, but it'll be just easier to collapse this to a function for reuse elsewhere. We'll collapse that to a function. One thing about functions, we've seen a few different types, like there's the nodes that have no exec on them or are just like getting a value. Well, that's kind of what this node is. One way we can change that is by turning it to a pure function call. A pure function doesn't actually give a good description here, but I wonder if I can hold Control or Alt. No, interesting. But what that function, what that flag means is it won't be changing any data inside of it. It just has, it's just getting a value or calculating a value or something and spitting that back out, but it's not setting any variables inside it. Yes, sir. Only as A and B. I was clicking the add pin with the plus button to add more. And if you add too many or anything like that, you can actually right click on the pin you want and you can remove those pins as needed. All right. So we've got this new function. It's not got a name. All this function was doing is getting the current agent. So let's rename it to represent what it is. Get current agent. All right. So we've got this nice, easy to use function. So when we press spacebar, I want to tell the current agent. So we'll get our current agent. And the output is just named output. Let's rename that also to currently selected agent. And I don't like any spaces and inputs or outputs or variables. It'll automatically add spaces when we're reading it on the graph, but all right. And from that, since this type is actually a BP nav agent reference, we're able to call functions straight from it. We look at our toggle pause is a function that's built into that agent from the last time that we were adding it. So when we press that, we'll just call toggle pause. All right, file save. And let's go ahead and try and play. If we play, and I haven't pressed right, so I haven't selected anything yet. If we press space, oh, boom, there's stuff in my output log. If we stop playing, access none, trying to read property, blah, blah, blah. One of the reasons I recommend always having your output log showing, it gives you a lot more info than just the message, but it's actually saying, attempted to access index -1 from array agents of length 2. So we're getting basically the same thing as an index out of bounds error. Well, that's easy to fix. We just will add some protection to prevent it from trying to pause our current agent. We'll check if our current agent is still valid or current index is valid. We see we were using that right up here. And specifically, I'm gonna hook that separate node up to it because we're gonna collapse this to a function. In fact, we'll be using a branch in it. So we're gonna basically combine all 3 of these nodes, or all 4 of these nodes, into an easy to use thing and ask, is current selected valid? So we're collapsing this. If I try and do a function, collapse to function failed. Let's see. Found too many output connections in the selection. So the reason why it's failing to collapse to a function is because functions can only have one output. They can only have one return path. They can't branch inside of it. What we can do instead is collapse it to a macro. Macros support multiple execs. So we have 1 exec in and 2 execs out. Let's rename it because new macro 0 doesn't tell me anything about what it's doing. Let's say is current selection valid, is index valid. And if we look at patrol, no, patrol, I'm not doing that on. Is index valid good enough name for now? Don't want to get hung up renaming things too much. In here, we'll get a true. That would be when it is valid. So rather than saying then, we'll rename it to is valid. And the false will be not valid. All right. So we're cutting this functionality down from 4 different nodes to just one simple is valid node. So that cleans up the logic for our, when we press the right arrow, our space bar would have had to copy and paste those nodes as well. We can now just reuse that macro. Is valid. If it's not valid, but we have pressed space, let's go ahead and print a string, letting us know that we have must select an agent before trying to issue a command. Cool. So let's try and get the spacebar running again. If we go ahead and play now, we press space. We are no longer seeing an error message in the output log, but we are seeing we have to select an agent. All right, well, that makes sense. So I press right arrow. We've got an agent selected. I press space. It issued that command to the agent there. If I press space again, it unpauses it. I'm going to pause him again. We press right. We select the other agent, and didn't mean to pause them right on top of each other. Oh no, they're going to get stuck. Oh, they did push past each other. Fantastic. But if I'm sitting here and pressing right, and we're looking at the game itself, I don't know how many times I pressed it. There's no visual indication of which one I have selected right now. That's going to be very hard to figure out basically which one I have selected and which one I'm going to issue this command to. So let's add some in-game visuals for that as well. For this, I'm going to close out of the stuff we don't need, just that and our message log. So we have our level and agents manager. We will be working with our manager again because that changes the selection. Our agent, each individual agent will want to add some sort of visual to. For the assignment here, it will have you just add like a disk below. You do not have to copy what's shown in the graphic here. It does mention that you can add just whatever visual component you want to add. So for the selection, let's go ahead and let's add a kind of dunce cap to it. Let's go for a cone, not search. We're going to have to add a component. Use this search box for a cone. And that cone, we'll go ahead and raise up in the, let's attach it to the capsule. And why can I not move that? Oh, I had to compile. Let's put the cone over this agent. Let's also scale it down a bit. Maybe a quarter of the size. As our selection index. And let's rotate it around. Let's go 180, so it's more of like a little cursor over the head. All right. I'm going to rename this from just being a basic cone to be our selection indicator. All right. Now all of our agents will have that when we're playing in our level now. They'll have that cone with them because we're changing the blueprint, which these are using to run their code as well as define how they're all set up. We need to have some sort of change happen. This one will have you change the actual color of the visual element. Let's do the similar thing, but we're going to use some different colors since gray and yellow are kind of boring. So when that happens, I'm going to add some functionality to our nav agent in order to change the color. Well, hey, we already have one that's kind of already showing us how to change the mesh's color, specifically the body color. But if we want to change just the general selection indicator color, we'll be doing something very similar where we're setting a vector parameter value on materials, but specifically for this mesh. set vector parameter value on materials. All right. Well, one thing we want this to do is we're going to create a custom event so that we can call that from our agent manager and have it interact, just like we did with like the toggle pause from the last assignment. We'll say toggle selected. And there's already a toggle visibility. I want to add a custom event first and just rename it to what I want. Toggle selection. So when we call this, we're going to need a branch very similar to, I'm going to start moving this up. I just looked down there for the set vector parameter, but the functionality for it will be more similar to this toggle pause. This is how we can toggle. We have some sort of thing tracking if it's currently on or not, and then reversing that state and stuff. We use that same concept to have just one function we can call to toggle it on or off. I believe this one might have the bool passed. Or, oh no, it has you add the toggle on your own. So we'll just go through that together. All right, so first thing I'm going to need is a couple of colors to choose what values I want. Let's go ahead and add a couple of variables for selection indicator on. So color selected, or yeah, change it from a bool. Bool wouldn't be a very good value to use for color. We have linear colors with a nice color wheel to select. I'm going to duplicate this. So when it is selected versus color not selected. All right. So we'll go ahead and drop these onto the graph. And we've got a couple of variables to use. There's a few things we're going to need to know. Let's first get it just changing on before we worry about the toggle portion. Linear colors can be connected up to a vector. It's just 4 floats being converted from like this one. When we select it, we're able to have a nice color wheel. That's why I like using the colors or linear colors versus typing just RGB values. Parameter name. Well, I need to know what parameter I'm going to be changing on these materials. So if I look at my selection indicator and look at the material it's using, it's got basic shape material. If I wanted to see that in the content browser, we can click this button right here. I see it's now showing that it's just a built-in engine material, basic shape material. We can open that up. It's not got a lot to it. It's got a color parameter or a parameter named color, capital COLOR. All right, well, that's the parameter I'd want to change. So we don't need that material open anymore. We'll just type the name of that parameter here, color, and we should be good to go. So anytime we call this toggle selection, we'll tell it to change that color to our selected color, which right now is black. We'll go for a different color when it is selected. Let's put a big red arrow right over the selected one. All right. That should be good to go. Next up, our agent manager. Well, it's the one that changes which one it has selected. So it's going to need to tell the agent it has selected after it's selected that one. So it changed the selection to blah, blah, blah. We'll get our currently selected, get current agent, and tell it to toggle its selection color. Okay. File save. And if we go ahead and play this, now if we press right, we see we've got that top left one selected. We're able to issue that one a command. Although if I press right again, we've now showing both of them as red. All right, well, that's not quite right. If I keep switching, we're only setting it to red all the time. So we don't want to necessarily do that. Back in our nav agent, this is supposed to toggle, not just always set it to select it. One thing we can do, we can check, and actually I don't know if it can from vector parameter value on materials. We may need to add a bool for it to track. But let's explore that a little bit. From a mesh, I don't know if we can get vector parameter. No, it's not gonna do that. Get material. Get parameter info. Oof. Yeah, that's going, well, maybe I can do it. Layer function. Not sure which that one is. And just wanted to see if there was an easy way to do this. Index, no. Nope, not gonna be quite that easy. So let's just add a, we're gonna need to know whether we want to turn this selection on or off rather than using the toggle here. So our toggle selected, we'll just take an input on whether it needs to be, whether it is turning on. If it is, that'll simplify the code here. We'll just branch off that. Then we set it to selected. If it's not, then we'll basically be doing the same thing, but we'll be changing it to not selected. And our not selected color first. We never changed that from default to black. Let's just go, fine. Sure, why not? Not selected will be black. That'll be fine. File save. And when we are calling this function, we just said we wanted to take an input of a bool. So if we want to find out where this is referenced rather than just jumping to the spot, let's say I forgot where that is, we can use find references, right click on a node, find references. It looks for through the current blueprint and shows those results here. And then we can click these binoculars to find out if any other blueprints are referencing it. Our agent's manager is calling toggle selection. So it's actually calling that right here. Now, since we added this, it just used the default value of false. We need to tell it to turn that on. So after we've selected a new agent, tell it to turn it on. All right. So if we play now, and we press right, turns that on. Press right again. Uh-oh, they're both still on. When I'm pressing right and already have an agent selected, there's actually two things happening. We have to tell that one to turn off its selection and then move to the next one. So just like we did when we press spacebar, before we change the selection, and that's all this code right here is actually changing the selection. Add a comment around that just by tapping C around selected nodes. Change selection, loop if past end. All right. But before I change which one I have selected or modify that index in any way, I want to know, do we already have one that's valid? If we do, let's go ahead and get that agent and tell it to toggle. It's not really a toggle anymore. It's more of just a set selection on or off. We'll send it a false. It's no longer turning on. And let's rename this while we're at it, just since it's not quite a toggle. Toggle selection, rename you to turn on or off selection. All right. So now it should turn off currently selected agent. If we press right that very first time for the game, run of the game, or at the beginning of the game rather, this would return not valid. We don't have one selected at the beginning. We'd still want it to select a new one, but we would want it to skip this part. So we now have a couple more branches and a little bit more complex. But we should have all the functionality we need. Now to press right again, turns that off, and we can cycle through. All right. So that is that's all working for our right arrow. Let's say we wanted to switch things up a little bit and have our left arrow working. We've only ever been incrementing and going through an array in a forwards direction. Let's change that up. And for this, we'll go to our agent manager. I'm going to grab this, move it a little bit. Oh, I missed a node. Just so we have some extra space, because we're going to be basically doing the same thing as right, just a little bit different. We'll add a big old comment around this. Change to the next agent. That's what happens when we press right. All right. So left, we'd go to change to the previous agent, or rather than doing the increment, we'd be doing a decrement. So let's look at left. Oh, there's a lot of lefts. Keyboard left, much better. When we press left, we'd want to do basically the same thing. If it already has one selected, turn that off. So we'll copy that right down here. Next thing it was doing was the increment. Here's where things change. Change selection. Let's get more specific with the comment. Positive. And this one will be doing the opposite. Rather than doing a cur selected plus plus, we'll be doing cur selected minus minus, or decrement. And we'd want that decrement to happen even if we press it at the beginning of the game. After we've changed that, we need to do an is valid check to see if we need to loop. Is valid. If it is valid, we don't need to loop. It'd be basically just going through and doing the same thing. So rather than copying and pasting it, I'm going to just drop it in up there, since that's kind of shared functionality between these two. If it's not valid though, and we think about this, and let's say, now let's just do an example in here, talk about it. If we have, let's say, 3 agents, we have 3 agents in here, and we're doing the increments. It goes from sub-0, 1, 2, goes to an invalid index, and then we are setting it back to 0. That works great for going forward through the array. If we're going reverse through the array, if we're already at -1, it's not a valid index. So we pressed left. It's definitely not a valid index. I want it to loop to the other end of the array, the large boundary, or whatever you want to refer to it as, and the end. If we ask our array, we can get the array. It has this really handy thing called last index. Even if we didn't have that, one other way we can always think about arrays, since they start counting at 0, however many elements we have, last valid index would always be the length of the array -1, just for reference. But since this has a last index, we'll use that, since it's saves an extra node of having to do a subtract 1. So we ask our array, what is the very last index? We're going to be setting our current selected to that. And that happens if this is not valid. After we've looped it for that upper bound, going to the or going past the low bound, sending it over to the last index, we are changing that selection. So we want to have that print of what selection we have, as well as turn that selection on. All right. So 2 agents, it's going to be kind of hard to tell what's going on. I still see that my engine content is showing up here. We generally don't want to have that up. It can be rather easy if you open up something from the engine and let's say you accidentally deleted color, that gets saved for the engine you have on your computer and can break things across any other projects. And you'd have to run verify to re-download the default the engine came with. So I would recommend going to your view options and just turning off show engine content when you're not actively searching for something. All right. But as I was saying, we're about ready to test that left arrow. Let's just go ahead and duplicate one of these agents. Holding Alt and dragging in the scene will duplicate. We've now got 3 agents. Let's have this one specifically go just between the bottom left and bottom right pins or nav points. For that, with this agent selected, we can select specifically its patrol state. It's got 3 in there right now. Let's change that to just 2 and pick them from the scene. I'm going to use the little eyedropper tool. Oh, that's hard to get right on the line. Pick that nav point. And pick that nav point. Cool. So the bottom 2 are set for that one. Press play. one thing I forgot to do, if we just press right, we've got index 0, agent 2, index 1, it's just the agent 4, press right again. Uh-oh, we're back to 2. It's only going through those 2. Well, I set this new one up, I set its nav points, but I never told our manager about it. Our manager still just has those 2 agents. Let's go ahead and make sure we add that third one in there. Oh, didn't mean to do that. I meant to add another one and select it. But let's say we want that one first. Yeah, let's just add it as the third one. So our order of selection will go 2, 4, 3. Yeah, no, 2, 3, 4. And we can rename them whatever. Let's call this one Bob. 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 Then we have Tim over here. And this one, if we double click it, see that top left one. And Mario. All right. So now got our agents all renamed and set up. Let's test out our functionality. If I press left immediately, we're going through the index in a backwards way. 2, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0. If I press right, we're at 0 right now. 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. And we're able to cycle through all of them, see which one we have selected, press space, issue a specific command to one agent at a time, and control them a little bit better. All right. So that is about it for today. Scroll back down here, and from a recent play, haven't really had any issues. I can see all the print strings from the last playthrough and all that. Cool. So reminder that for that assignment, you will be doing a screenshot submission. Very important that you make sure that you have all of these bullet points listed, actually showing in the single screenshot. Keep in mind that it does want you to display that the nav points for an agent that you have in the scene. So you will have to remember that that's in the control state now, not just on the agent itself. All right. It also wants one actually paused. We have, if we look at this screenshot, and zooming is so weird in Google Docs. We have one agent paused. That's the one we currently have selected. And the other agent's just running. It's not selected, showing that darker gray. And then also wants to make sure it shows the agent changing to state pause. Cool. So any questions about the assignment or anything I went over today? And if you were able to follow along with the lecture and have things changed from the document, I'm totally cool with you using this method of having the agent manager be a separate object rather than being right in the level. All right. Well, if there are no questions, thanks for joining, and I will go ahead and close down, then opening up for lab at 3 p.m. Later on, everyone.